your support very much. Naturopathic medicine is often a lonely profession, and I appreciate your support more than you know. Like the fella said, will an apple a day really keep the doctor away? Well, if your aim is good, it will. Youngevity is in a transitional state. We're growing like a weed. And by way of disclosure, I am not a Youngevity distributor. I used to be. I had to give my distributorship up in order to be able to tell you what I'm going to tell you tonight. We're going to talk about this. I don't make any money from Youngevity. I'm not paid from Youngevity. I'm not on Youngevity's. I'm not a member of the corporate anything. I make zero money from Youngevity. And I will go to my grave as a cheerleader for Youngevity, because the work that Youngevity is doing, the work that Dr. Wallach started, and which all of you are helping to foster and move along, in my opinion, is one of the most important things that any human being can do. Humanity needs you more than you know. You are the last best hope that most people in your community have to live a long, healthy, and dare I say it out loud, wealthy life. Now, we need to keep it all in perspective, and we need to understand things that are not normally understandable, right? There's the stuff that we know, and there's the stuff that we don't know, and then there's the stuff that's so far outside of our reference range, man, I didn't even know that I didn't know that. But when it comes to the laws around vitamin speak, there's a lot that you didn't know, and it's my intention tonight, this afternoon, to bring you up to speed with that so you can forward Youngevity health without any fear of legal retribution. I'm going to show you where the lines are, and of course it's up for you to stay inside of those lines. This is, I think, one of the most important lectures that I've ever given for Youngevity Nation, and I appreciate your being here very much. First things first, right? It's always good to start in the beginning. While the medical doctors have been in exclusive control over the delivery of medicine for the last 95 years, remember, we do not have a free medical market. While the medical doctors have been in exclusive charge of the delivery of medicine, cancer, there's no cure for cancer. We've spent nearly $1 trillion. That's $1 billion. And we're no closer to a cure for cancer inside of conventional medicine than we were when Richard Nixon instituted his war on cancer in the 1960s. Heart disease, obesity, autism, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, chronic diseases, you name it, they're not getting better, they're getting worse. And they're not getting worse because you have a bad gene, they're not getting worse because you have a voodoo curse. They're getting worse because the medical doctors are not trained in medicine. Bankruptcy in the United States, the leading cause? Medical bills. Medical bills are the leading cause of bankruptcy. Because what? What's the most expensive medicine? It's the one that doesn't work. 643,000 Americans declare bankruptcy every year because of medical bills. And it's not because, well, there is a little bit of, padding of the bill at the hospital, and hospitals doing more tests than they need to, and more chemotherapy than they need to, and more drugs than they need to. But ultimately, the final reason, in the final analysis, medicine is so expensive because MD-directed medical treatments for chronic disease are the wrong dog for the hunt. This is U.S. healthcare spending as a percentage of gross national product from 1960 to 2010. You can see we're spending a greater percentage of our tax dollars, of our revenue as a nation, on medical care, and we're not getting any better. As a matter of fact, we're getting fatter, we're getting sicker, and our children are all being born autistic. 1 out of 60 kids now is born autistic. 1 out of 60. This is unacceptable, but it's not just the United States. The UK from 2000, the projection through 2020, this, by the way, on the left is in billions of euros, or in the UK it's pounds, billions of pounds. We're spending more and more and more and more money and getting less and less and less and less results. This is the only industry on planet Earth inside of which this can happen. If the automobile industry kept making cars that exploded after you drove them off the lot for 30 days, that company would go out of business. But the medical doctors do not go out of business because they exist in a self-regulating, self-policing monopoly. It is the monopoly of medicine which is to blame for these unbelievably poor results. It's not any difference in Canada. Canada is going bankrupt because of medical bills. In Canada, it's socialized medicine. They take your healthcare dollars right out of your paycheck before you even see your paycheck. You have no say in the matter. And in Canada, healthcare costs are escalating. They're rising. And everybody is still sick. We're getting sicker, not healthier. The proper perspective makes a big difference and is very enlightening. Interestingly enough, it's good to be the king. When you are the monopoly, you can do whatever you want to and get away with it. The leading cause of death in the United States is MD-directed medical treatments. MD-directed medical treatments kill more people every year than heart disease. MD-directed medical treatments kill more people than cancer. And it's not because the medical doctors are bad or evil or sadistic people. It's because their type of medicine is inconsistent with the reality of the human experience. They are the wrong dog for the hunt. Death and destruction at the hands of the medical doctors, that perhaps is a little bit of an extreme picture. But I put it up to help shock you, to help wake you up, to help snap you out of it. Your medical doctor may be the nicest person that God ever created. But your medical doctor does not know what's best for you. Your medical doctor only knows what they've been trained in. And as it turns out, what they've been trained in is only a small piece of the pie of medical science. The pharmaceutical industry and the medical monopoly for the last 100 years has convinced you that the only people that practice medicine are MDs and everybody else is a back-of-the-bus quack with unsafe, unproven, unscientific treatments, and it's nonsense. Interestingly enough, your medical doctor is not trained in medicine. Nobody is trained in medicine. Medicine is a vast domain. There are many different types of medicine, many different types of dogs, right? They're all good for different things. Your medical doctor isn't trained in medicine. They are trained in allopathic medicine. I'm trained, Dr. Wallach is trained in naturopathic medicine, right? We have many different types. Allopathic medicine, what the MDs are trained in, naturopathic medicine, homeopathic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, the oldest system of medicine on the planet, chiropractic medicine, etc., etc. Many different ways up the road of healing, but the only road that you have any understanding of, the only type of medicine that's practiced in your hospital, the only type of medicine that your insurance pays for, the only type of medicine that your local universities do research on, and the only type of medicine they do TV shows about is MD-directed allopathic medicine. And we have become socialized to believe that the MD's you-know-what doesn't stink, and everybody else is a back-of-the-bus quack with substandard training. Interestingly enough, allopathic medicine is really good for certain things. It's really good for surgery, it's really good for trauma, and it's really good for a handful of infectious diseases. But like the fella said, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So even though you may in fact not need surgery, the surgeon is going to tell you need surgery because it's the only thing that they know. Allopathic medicine believes that the human body is a bag of biochemicals waiting to break. There is no spirit, there is no vital force, there is no soul force, because none of these things have been measured. And to the allopathic reductionist, if it can't be measured, it doesn't exist. So since nobody's ever dissected the soul out of a human body, it doesn't exist. To the psychiatrist, consciousness itself is a function of biochemistry. And when you're dead, it's lights out, game over. Interestingly enough, in allopathic medical philosophy, a cure is not the goal. MD is not trained to cure you. Your MD is trained to manage your symptoms, right? I mean, think about it. Your medical doctor doesn't even know how to cure heartburn. They can manage it with the little purple pill, but they can't cure it. Now, to the profession that doesn't even know how to cure heartburn, we've given $1 trillion to come up with a cure for cancer, and we wonder why there's no cure for cancer. Because we've taken the wrong dog to the hunt. Interestingly enough, when you bring allopathic medical philosophy to bear on chronic disease, it's like taking your watch to a blacksmith. Probably not a good idea. Blacksmith doesn't have the right tools to fix an intricate pocket watch, an intricate watch. It's the wrong skill set. But because the monopoly has been present for almost 100 years, because most people in the United States don't even know what allopathic is, they just think that doctors do medicine, everybody moves forward and everybody follows their brother and their sister and their mother and the father off of the cliff into the land of physical, mental, and emotional despair. Interestingly enough, this guy saw it coming. 200 years ago, Dr. Benjamin Rush, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, here's what he said over 200 years ago. Unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize itself into a dictatorship. To restrict the art of healing to one class of men and deny equal privileges to others will constitute the Bastille of medical science. All such laws are un-American and despotic. Ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what's happened in the United States for the last 100 years. Dr. Wallach and myself are licensed naturopathic physicians. We had to do 4 years of pre-med at a fully accredited medical school. I did mine at the University of Massachusetts. Then you have to do 4 years of naturopathic education at a fully accredited naturopathic medical school in the United States, fully accredited. Then you have to pass national boards. Then you have to pass state boards. Then you have to do 25 hours. In my case, I have to do 25 hours of continuing education credit every year. The medical doctor has to do 10 every 2 years. But these are the states that we're licensed in, the blue states, that we're licensed in. Only 18 states in the United States license and regulate naturopathic medicine. We don't have a free medical market. Do the laws of physics, do the laws of nature, do the laws of mathematics change when you cross a state line? No. The only reason that this exists, the only reason that all 50 states do not license and regulate naturopathic medicine is because of the monopoly. Interestingly enough, down here, the U.S. Virgin Islands, they also license and regulate naturopathic medicine. Well, they do, naturopathic medicine, and it's because of the work of this woman, Dr. Wendy Coram, who happens to be a Youngevity distributor. This is why I love this company so much, because it's filled with open-minded, good-hearted, socially proactive people. People who are willing to stand up and say, you know what, enough is enough. Here's a line in the sand, I'm drawing it, and it is this far and no further. I am tired of my brothers and sisters, and nephews and nieces, and sons and daughters and parents dying. I'm tired of them suffering needlessly. Enough is enough. It's time we let somebody else into the game. Right? Many different types of holistic medicine, chiropractic, acupuncture. Acupuncture, right, is the most widespread medicine in China. Something like 1.5 billion people in China use acupuncture, but in the United States, the scientific community says, no, it's quackery, it's hokum. They use acupuncture in China as anesthesia for open heart surgery. Oh no, but we can't have that here in the good old US of A. Ayurvedic medicine, the oldest system of medicine on planet Earth. No, we can't have that nonsense practiced here. Homeopathy, you've got to be kidding me, it's just placebo. Herbalism? I don't think so. Why would we have people make their own medicine at home? Why would we have people make their own medicine at home? They wouldn't have to buy it at the pharmacy anymore. Essential oils, oh no, we can't have that as a medical therapy, and certainly don't even consider yoga. Even though yoga has been scientifically proven to lower blood pressure, reduce anxiety, and increase longevity. Let's not have any of that. We do not exist in a free medical market. It hasn't been there for over 95 years here in the United States. And you know, it's easy to understand one aspect of the monopoly, money, right? It's easy to understand that. I think the easiest example of this is cancer. $95 billion per year is generated in the United States by the cancer industry, treating cancer with ineffective cancer treatments that don't work and which cause cancer.
Amen.
Can you imagine this existing in any other industry? No, but in a monopoly, it's all good, because in a monopoly, you can do whatever you want to do. Another very interesting aspect of a monopoly, which is often overlooked, and which I'm going to talk about now, is legislation. And in order to understand this, we have to take a step back, take a breath, and kind of take a longer view on how laws have been generated here in the United States. We think that we have freedom of speech, and we do. We do have freedom of speech. It's guaranteed by the First Amendment to the Constitution. You can say whatever you want to say, whenever you want to say it, more or less. You can't yell fire in a movie theater if there's no fire, right? It causes a stampede that's going to kill people. But you have freedom of speech. It's one of the greatest things about the United States of America. However, once you start selling things, your freedom of speech goes away. Once you start selling things, you enter into the game of commerce. And in the United States, when you are engaged in commerce, everything changes. And this is a very important thing for you to understand as Youngevity distributors moving forward. Don't worry, I have your back, and I will help you understand it. Now, one of the greatest things about the Constitution in the United States when it was developed was this concept of separation of powers, and the Founding Fathers were smart. Some of the smartest people to have existed on the planet in the last 300 years. They knew that if power was concentrated in one place, like the kings of England, right, the kings of Europe who they were trying to get away from, it became despotic, and it's good to be the king. The king can do whatever the king wants to do. No harm, no foul. They knew this. They had direct experience of it. So they set the U.S. up with 3 tiers of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial, for separation of powers. They wanted to spread the power out. The legislative is the Congress and Senate, your congressmen and women and your senators. It's the job of the legislative branch of government to make laws. That's their job. The executive branch, of course, the president, the vice president, the president's cabinet, their job is to oversee the fulfillment and the application of the law. And the judicial is the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, and they are to regulate and oversee the legal system, the court system in the United States. Nice 3-way separation of powers. The people that set this up were brilliant, and they talked about it all of the time. I'm a history buff. I love history, and if you read any of the stuff that was written around the Revolutionary War when they were trying to figure out how to set the government up, Washington was talking about it, Madison was talking about it, Jefferson, Hamilton, the Adams boys, they weren't actually brothers, they were cousins, John Adams and Sam Adams. Everybody was talking about this very important deal with separation of powers. It was a big deal. Here's what John Adams had to say about it. I think a people cannot be long free nor ever happy, whose government is in one assembly, because a single assembly possessed of all the powers of government would make arbitrary laws for their own interest, execute all laws arbitrarily for their own interests, and adjudge all controversies in their own favor. In other words, we don't want no more stinking kings, right? And by the way, don't you love these people, the way these people used to talk? Who talks like this anymore, right? I love history. But this was a big deal in the evolution of the legislative process in the United States, how the government was set up. Separation of powers was the very foundation on which the Constitution and everything moving forward was founded. Separation of powers was a very big deal. And from 1776 until 1935, we had separation of powers. Every time from 1976 to 1935 that one aspect of the government tried to get more control, right, an unequal amount of control, the Supreme Court slapped them down. Said, no, 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 you can't do that. We need to have separation of powers. It is a fundamental thing to the stability of our government. But in 1935, this guy was elected. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He brought in the New Deal, and this was right during the Great Depression, after the Great Depression in the United States. The New Deal was Roosevelt's baby. And in order for the New Deal to work, he wanted to put people to work and build roads and do all kinds of things and develop social programs, right? In order for this to work, in order for the New Deal to be a New Deal and to be a law, there had to be some shenanigans. And what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did for the first time in the history of this country, he forced the judicial to adopt the doctrine of delegation of powers. So, and this happened because of some interesting political shenanigans. Roosevelt was so impassioned about having the New Deal move forward, he threatened to generate a law which would have made the Supreme Court judges all have to retire after 70, and 5 of the Supreme Court judges were over 70 at that time. So if he passed that law, all of the judges would have been out of a job. So they acquiesced to his wishes to have delegation of power, and he did it. This was referred to as the switch in time that saved 9. It was a thing that happened between Roosevelt and the Supreme Court. They went back and forth. Finally, the Supreme Court capitulated in order to save their hides, save their jobs. And they said, okay, it's okay that we don't let the elected officials make law anymore. We're going to let the elected officials appoint people to make law. And that opened the floodgates to everything that exists today. Separation of powers went away after 1935 in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. Now, in the United States, there are 440 governmental organizations which we have delegated power to. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Department of Education, the Central Intelligence Agency, Environmental Protection Agency, everybody's favorite, the IRS, the FDA, and the Federal Trade Commission, right? These people make their own laws, and none of them are elected. They're appointed by the people that we elect. If you have a problem with the IRS, you don't go to court, you go to tax court. And tax court isn't really a court. In tax court, the only thing that's going to be adjudicated is how much you're going to pay the IRS and how long you're going to go to jail for. That's it. And it's the same with everything else. All of these governmental organizations came into being once separation of powers went away and the courts agreed to let the legislative branch of government appoint people to make laws. This is a big, bad voodoo daddy, and it's been happening for so long that most people are completely unaware of it. This is important to Youngevity Nation because of these two institutions, the Food and Drug Administration and the Federal Trade Commission. And the following slides, I think, are some of the most important slides I've ever presented to anybody in Youngevity, so pay attention. According to the Food and Drug Administration, who makes their own rules, none of whom were elected, they were all appointed, the only thing that can treat a disease is a drug.